Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're back with episode 6 of our Reddit horror story series. I've picked out some of the creepiest, most unsettling stories that people have shared online, and trust me, these are the kind of stories that stay with you long after they're over. So, sit back, relax, put on your headphones, and let's get straight into today's stories. This story was shared on our /Let's Not Meet, posted by Reddit user Theglo and Gemily. It's titled, I got kidnapped for a week after being drugged at a party. Basically, I got kidnapped and held against my will for a week or so. This happened when I was 16. I am 19 now, female for what it is worth. I went to a party that some of the older kids from my school were going to. The only reason I went was that I thought it would make me look cool if everyone knew I went to this more adult party. It was the summer, so it is not like I had to worry about school anyway. This one guy there started talking to me and showed me where all the alcohol was so I could get a drink. He said his name was Jason and he was 25. When I told him that I was 16, he said I looked older than that. Then came my fatal mistake. I had to go to the bathroom, so I asked this guy to hold my drink for me. When I got out, he gave me my drink back, and like an idiot, I finished it real quick. He made me another drink, and then followed me around as I made my way through the party. I do not know if it was a few minutes, or more like 10 to 15, but I started to feel really sick and dizzy very suddenly. Jason said I should go outside for some fresh air, so I followed him outside. It was honestly hard to think straight, but the rest is kind of a blur. I vaguely remember getting into a car and bits and pieces of the drive, but then I passed out. I woke up in a bed, in a room, all alone. I still felt pretty woozy, so I just kind of lay there wondering how I got home, or if I was even at home at all. When I realized I was not in my own bed, I sat up and realized I was not even wearing my own clothes. I was wearing some kind of matching pajama set. The worst part about that is that I was not even wearing underwear, which I later learned meant that this creep took all my clothes off to dress me in this weird pajama outfit. Thankfully, in that moment, I did not connect those dots, but it would not matter for too long, because eventually Jason came into the room to bring me breakfast. I can only imagine he thought he was being unbelievably generous to bring me coffee and 2 toasted waffles. I am not going to go over a detailed retelling of the entire week. Every day was pretty much the same, and quite honestly, I just do not want to. Basically, for an entire week, he made me act like a living doll in his house. He watched me eat, changed my clothes to the outfits he picked out, and even used the bathroom. He always put drugs like ecstasy in my drinks, or somehow, to keep me in a positive attitude. It did not really work though, except for a few hours a day when the drug took effect. And then, for seemingly no reason that I can conceive of, he brought me out to his car, put a cloth bag or something over my head, and drove me to some place to drop me off. When I got out of his car, he sped away and I never saw him again. Eventually, I was walking along the side of the road and just collapsed from fatigue. I did not pass out, I just could not keep going. Apparently, someone saw me fall down and called the police, who then found me and brought me to the hospital. Well, the ambulance brought me there, and the police joined me to ask me what the heck was going on. They knew I was missing, and they pretty quickly figured out who I was, so they were able to call my parents. Next thing I know, my whole family is there to see me and praise the Lord that I was alive. I did my best to identify the guy who kidnapped me, and there was a pretty thorough investigation as far as I know, but they never found the guy. He was a total ghost. The police questioned nearly everyone who was at that party, and learned the name of the guy who was probably the one to kidnap me, but it was not a real name. The phone number anyone had for him was disconnected and only attached to a burner phone anyway. So yeah, they never caught the guy. It was easily the most traumatic thing to ever happen to me, and I hope it stays that way. But despite that, I know it could have been so much worse. I do not know why he never hurt me or assaulted me, but I am thankful he did not. I know so many kidnapping victims are treated much worse than I was. This story was shared on our /The Midnight Archives, hosted by Reddit user David_Hallow. It's titled, I quit commercial diving after what I saw at Hoover Dam. Most people think my job is insane. Honestly, they are probably right. When people talk about dangerous professions, they usually mention logging, commercial fishing, or construction. Those jobs earn their reputation. One mistake, one moment of bad luck, and you are fucked. Or hell, dead. Me? I always found myself drawn to danger. Maybe it is the adrenaline. Maybe it is because some part of me enjoys standing in places most people would never willingly go. You can learn a lot about a person from the work they choose to do. For me, that work is commercial diving. Most folks hear that and assume it is terrifying. Being dropped into cold, dark water hundreds of feet from the surface while surrounded by machinery that could crush you without warning does not exactly sound appealing to the average person. The funny thing is, I find it relaxing. Down there, the world becomes quiet. The noise of everyday life, the wife complaining, disappears beneath the water. It is just me, my equipment, and whatever job needs doing. I usually have music playing through my helmet while I work on oil rigs, ship hulls, intake structures, and all sorts of underwater machinery. After years in the profession, I thought I had seen everything the depths could throw at me. I was wrong, because in all my years of commercial diving, nothing, and I mean nothing, came close to making me soil my dive suit the way I almost did during a contract at the Hoover Dam. The water was murky that morning. Visibility could not have been more than 6 or 7 feet. My helmet lamp carved a narrow path through the darkness, illuminating clouds of suspended sediment drifting lazily through the reservoir. I remember feeling uneasy almost immediately. Not fear. Fear implies you have identified the threat. What I felt was the discomfort of being observed by something that had not revealed itself yet. The sensation settled between my shoulder blades and refused to leave. Something was down there with me. Heavy emphasis on something, because there is nothing in this world that should have been sharing those depths with me. The feeling was irrational enough that, like an idiot, I ignored it. Then I saw the marks. What the actual hell? They scored the concrete face of the dam in long, jagged trails. These were not little scratches left by debris or equipment. They stretched several feet across the wall and bit deep enough into the surface to expose steel beneath. I stopped swimming and stared. What unsettled me most was not their size. It was how familiar they looked. Almost human, or at least made by something trying very hard to be. 5 long gouges ran parallel to one another through decades of algae and sediment, climbing vertically along the dam before disappearing into darkness above. I keep my radio. Boy, somebody is going to have to explain how these ended up on a wall. The response was laughter. They thought I was joking. Honestly, so did I. I snapped a few photographs and continued downward. That is when I found the first handprint. 5 fingers, human proportions, pressed against the concrete nearly 30 feet below the surface. Then another, and another. Soon my lamp was finding them everywhere. Hundreds, thousands, maybe. Handprints layered over one another as if something had spent years climbing the face of the Hoover Dam. My breathing quickened. The sound echoed loudly inside my helmet. There had to be a reasonable explanation. There always had been before. Then my lamp caught movement. A figure. standing motionless on the reservoir floor. I nearly inhaled my own tongue. At first I assumed it was another diver. The silhouette was roughly human-sized, 2 arms, 2 legs, standing upright in the darkness. But that did not make sense. No diver would be down there alone. Not without communications. Not without a support crew. Not without lights. This thing had none. It simply stood at the edge of visibility, motionless and watching. I blinked. It was gone. Immediately, I radioed the surface. Confirm I am the only diver in the water. A moment later the reply came. Just you, Maxwell. No unauthorized personnel, secondary dive teams. Nobody else in the reservoir. I should have ascended right then. Instead, I kept working. I convinced myself my eyes were playing tricks on me. Fatigue, bad visibility, too much coffee before the dive. Stubbornness is a common flaw in my profession. God knows I have plenty of it. I was raised by a father who thought every problem could be solved by manning up. A strange shadow was not about to sabotage my paycheck. A few minutes later, I noticed something that truly frightened me. The safety line connecting me to the surface had gone slack. Completely slack. That should never happen. There are always currents. Movement. Tension. The line should constantly carry resistance. I turned my lamp toward it. The rope disappeared into darkness behind me. Then it moved. Not drifted. Moved. Something farther down the line had pulled it. My stomach tightened. Slowly, I followed the rope with my eyes until my beam reached its end. Something was holding it. A hand. A pale human hand emerging from the darkness. Its fingers wrapped around the line. Then a second hand appeared. And then a face. God, I wish I had not seen the face. Its skin was swollen and waterlogged, stretched tight across features that almost resembled a person. Almost. The eyes were too large, too dark, like something hauled up from the deepest part of the ocean. Then it smiled. The safety line jerked violently. I screamed into the radio. The thing released the rope and vanished downward with impossible speed. One moment it was there. The next it had been swallowed by darkness. Surface control immediately ordered my ascent. For once in my life, I did not argue. Halfway to the surface, I made the mistake that still haunts my dreams. I looked down. There was not just one. Dozens of pale figures stood along the face of the dam, motionless, watching. Their silhouettes clung to the concrete like barnacles that had learned how to imitate people. And every single one of them was staring upward, toward me, toward the surface. I reached the top in record time. The crew blamed nitrogen narcosis, stress, exhaustion. The photographs and film were reviewed. Most showed nothing unusual, just dark water and concrete. Except for one, the final clip from the helmet's recorder. The engineers never found an explanation for it. You can clearly see me inspecting the intake structure. You can clearly see the beam from my helmet lamp. And standing directly behind me is another diver. No safety markings, equipment, or air hose. Just a pale figure staring directly into the camera. The worst part? The timestamp showed the photograph had been taken 6 minutes before I noticed anything in the water, meaning that thing had already been following me for most of the dive. A few days later, men in black suits came to speak with me. That is about as much as I am legally allowed to say. I retired shortly afterward. People think I am crazy, walking away from a 6-figure career because I saw strange pale figures underwater? He must be nuts. Maybe I am. But every time I hear reports about water levels dropping at the Hoover Dam, I find myself wondering what happens when the reservoir finally shrinks enough. Because if those things were standing on the wall 60 feet underwater, sooner or later, they will not be underwater anymore. What the hell were those things? This story was shared on our /scary stories, posted by Reddit user Donovan221. It's titled, "My grandfather told me he was doing God's work." My grandfather used to have a saying. It was not something he would say often, just enough for it to be ingrained in my memory, enough for me to associate it with him. It was something he would say every time he came back from one of his hunting trips. Sometimes in passing, a few days after his return. Sometimes it would be one of the first things he said as soon as he came back, like he had been thinking about it for the entire trip home. He would tell me he was doing God's work. At the time, I did not think much of it. Just an old man controlling wildlife populations and enjoying time in nature. I thought it was just a phrase attached to the serenity he found out in those woods. At his funeral, it was one of the things I said about him. In my eulogy for him, I told the dozens of attendees that my grandfather was a hard-working man, a man that cared deeply about his family, a man that had lived a long life full of experiences, a man that was doing God's work. The phrase has been bouncing around more and more in my mind these days, ever since I made my discovery, the discovery that changed my perspective of my grandfather ever so slightly, just enough for me to become suspicious of what he really meant when he said it. In case you are not up to speed with my situation, my grandfather died recently. While other family members were fighting over who got what, my inheritance was clear, almost painstakingly. His hunting cabin was now mine, as well as everything inside, including his guest book. The book with a list of names and dates. Dates that went as far back as 1960. The book with one name in particular that sparked this spiral that I keep falling deeper and deeper into. His name was David Clifford. It was a name I had never heard before. A name that stuck with me enough to look into it when I left the cabin for the first time. A name of a man who had gone missing nearly 50 years ago, 3 days before his name was signed in my grandfather's guest book. It was only one of dozens of names. That is the part that made me return to the cabin. I needed to know more. I needed that guest book. I tried to rationalize, tried to tell myself it was a coincidence, that maybe, just maybe, this David was not the one who had gone missing. However, the more I searched, the more red flags began to emerge. He was from the same region. He was around my grandfather's age back then. But the one detail that stuck out to me was the simple fact that David Clifford was not a hunter. He actually was not much of anything. A lowlife, a con man, a raging drunk, remembered only by his crimes and capers. Needless to say, I was ready to find more. I could not sleep for 2 days after my initial return from the cabin. I did not know where to go, who I should tell, if anybody. All I knew was there was something waiting to be uncovered in that guest book. I did not intend on staying. I made the 2-hour journey back to the cabin with one goal in mind: retrieve the book. So that is what I did. I ignored the beauty. I ignored the temptation to stay, the temptation to rest after the long drive. I grabbed the book and returned home in silent anticipation. I could not stop staring at the book the entire way home. It looked new but old. The leather was cracked, but the pages were new. Hardly able to contain myself, I pulled into my driveway, guest book tucked tightly under my arm as I ascended the steps to my front door. I locked myself in my room. I laid the book out on the desk in front of me. I stared at it for a few moments, pondering its contents. With a deep breath, I slowly opened the book. I cannot say I did not expect what I found. Each name belonged to a person who mysteriously vanished. Each entry was dated a few days after their initial disappearance. And, for the most part, each person had a colorful history. Notorious women and children abusers, drug-addicted youths, murderers. Each Google search solidified the belief that my grandfather was not at all who I thought he was. However, there were some entries that made me realize he was not a force for good, either. Mackenzie Love, December 8th, 1997. Endurance runner. Challenging to keep up. Mrs. Love was a kindergarten teacher, a former college cross-country athlete. She mysteriously disappeared December 3rd of 1997 and has yet to be found. Marcus Lambert, March 6th, 2001. Numbers guy? Could not navigate the land. Lambert went missing February 28th, 2001. He was an accountant for a local bank. He left behind a wife and 2 children who searched valiantly, ultimately to no avail. The more I read, the sicker I became. There were so many names, I began to feel overwhelmed and dizzy. Instead of putting the book away or calling authorities, I continued flipping, page after page, not even reading, just completely enthralled by the sheer volume of names. Eventually, I found myself on the last page, and that is when I found something I had neglected to notice during my first visit to my grandfather's old hunting cabin. A message written on the inside of the back cover. A message directed at me. God's work is never finished. Our next story comes from our /NoSleep, posted by Reddit user Kopuz21. The title is, I was paid €200 a day to clean my neighbor's backyard. Then my cousin found the photographs. A while ago, I was in a critical financial situation, so I started looking for anything that could make me some quick money. I went around the street where I grew up, asking people if they needed their lawns cut, rubbish removed, or backyards cleaned. One of the first people I asked was a neighbor I had known for years. I did not know him personally, but I knew his face and had spoken to him several times. He was in his 50s and had always seemed like a quiet, friendly man. He immediately offered me €200 per day, which was far more than I expected. The only problem was that his backyard was enormous, around 1,000 square meters, covered with dead leaves, broken furniture, bags of rubbish, and rusted metal. There were 2 houses on the property. He lived in the main house, while the other was a ruined 5-bedroom house that had been abandoned for as long as I could remember. I did not own any proper equipment, so my cousin lent me his minivan to remove the rubbish. I offered him €100, but he refused. He had recently become a father and was struggling financially too, so he understood how important the job was to me. On my 3rd day, I brought lunch but forgot to bring water. I ate around midday, then continued working under the sun for several more hours. By that point, I was exhausted and extremely thirsty. I was standing about 50 meters from the abandoned house when I decided to walk to the main house and ask my neighbor for some water. At that exact moment, I looked at one of the old house's windows and saw him standing behind it. He was staring directly at me. It was definitely his face, or at least I was convinced it was. We looked at each other for around 5 seconds before he slowly moved away from the window. I walked over and knocked on the old front door, but nobody answered. I knocked twice more and called his name. The house remained completely silent. I walked to the main house, around 200 meters away, and my neighbor opened the door within seconds. I asked him for some water, and instead of giving me a glass, he handed me a cold 1.5-liter bottle from his refrigerator. A glass will not be enough if you are working out there, he said. Keep the bottle. Before returning to work, I asked why he had been watching me from the abandoned house. His expression changed immediately. He looked over my shoulder toward the ruin and asked exactly which window I had seen him in. When I pointed it out, he seemed genuinely uncomfortable. It was not me, he said. You have probably been in the sun too long. Then he lowered his voice. But if you see anyone in there again, do not approach them and do not talk to them. Come straight here and tell me. I asked if someone had been breaking into the property. He did not answer. He just told me to drink the water and stay near the van. I convinced myself that the heat had made me imagine it, so I continued working for another 2 hours. By then, the sun was disappearing and I was ready to leave. As I loaded the last bag into the minivan, I looked toward the abandoned house and saw someone standing in its doorway. From that distance, it looked exactly like my neighbor again. The person was not waving or calling to me. He was simply standing there, with one hand resting against the doorframe, watching. I remembered what my neighbor had said, so I got into the van without acknowledging him. When I reached the entrance, I discovered that the gate was closed. It had never been closed while I was working there. I drove back to the main house and knocked because I needed the gate opened, and my neighbor still had to pay me. Nobody answered. I called his phone and heard it ringing inside the house, but he did not pick up. While I waited, I heard slow footsteps crossing the gravel somewhere behind me. I did not turn around immediately. I stood there listening as they came closer, one step at a time, then stopped. When I finally looked, nobody was there. The abandoned house's doorway was empty, but its front door was now closed. I knocked harder and called my neighbor's name. From inside the main house, I heard movement, followed by what sounded like the front door being locked from the other side. A few seconds later, the gate at the end of the driveway began to open by itself. I ran back to the minivan and started driving toward it. The gate moved painfully slowly, and for several seconds the gap was not wide enough for the van. As I waited, I checked the mirror. The figure was standing behind the van, close enough that I could now see his pale face. He looked like my neighbor, but his clothes were different, and he was smiling in a way that made me feel as if he expected me to recognize him. I locked the doors. He walked toward the driver's side, but the gate finally opened enough for me to squeeze through. As I drove away, he did not follow. He just stood in the middle of the driveway. I looked back once more and saw my actual neighbor watching from an upstairs window of the main house. He immediately stepped behind the curtain when he noticed me looking. My payment arrived later that night, along with a message apologizing for not answering the door. My neighbor claimed he had been in the shower and had opened the gate remotely when he heard the van. I knew that was not true. His hair and clothes had been completely dry when I saw him upstairs. Still, I needed the money and did not want trouble, so I decided not to go back and tried to forget about it. A few days later, my cousin called me. He had been cleaning the minivan before installing his baby's car seat and found a black plastic bag pushed underneath the rear bench. Inside were 11 printed photographs of me working in the backyard. Most had been taken from the windows of the abandoned house. Some showed me carrying bags, eating my lunch, or drinking the bottle of water. One was a close-up of my face. The final photograph showed me standing at the main house that evening, waiting for somebody to answer the door. Whoever took it had been standing only a few meters behind me. My cousin wanted to know how the bag had gotten inside the van. I still had the keys the entire time, although one of the rear doors sometimes failed to lock properly. Someone could have opened it, but that did not explain why they had left the photographs there. There was no note and no warning. It felt like whoever had taken them wanted me to know I had been watched. I became angry instead of frightened. My cousin was angry too, so we drove back together the following afternoon. We wanted answers, and we wanted them quickly. The gate was open, but my neighbor's car was not there. We knocked on the main house for several minutes without receiving an answer. My cousin then noticed movement inside the abandoned house. Someone had stepped away from an upstairs window. We walked over, shouting that we knew about the photographs. This time, the front door was not locked. It opened slightly when my cousin knocked. The smell inside was terrible, a mixture of damp wood, cigarettes, and spoiled food. Despite the condition of the exterior, someone had clearly been living there. There was a mattress on the floor, empty food cans, bottles of water, and stacks of newspapers. On one wall were dozens of photographs. Most showed my neighbor entering and leaving his house, but several were of people walking along the street. There were even photographs of my cousin's minivan taken days before I started the job. Then the front door closed behind us. A man spoke from the hallway and asked why we had come back. At first, I thought it was my neighbor, but when he stepped into the light, I saw that he was thinner, older looking, and had a large scar running from his ear to his neck. He resembled my neighbor enough to be mistaken for him from a distance. He told us the photographs were not meant for me. They were meant for his brother. Before we could ask what that meant, my actual neighbor appeared outside and began shouting for us to leave the house. The man inside immediately became agitated. My cousin grabbed my arm, and we pushed past him before running outside. My neighbor locked the door behind us and finally admitted the man was his older brother, who had serious mental health problems and had been secretly staying in the ruined house. He claimed his brother was harmless and that he had not told anyone because he was afraid the authorities would take him away. When I asked why he had hired me to work so close to the building, he said he believed his brother had left weeks earlier. He also insisted he had no idea how the photographs entered the van. We left and never returned. My neighbor transferred the money he owed me, plus another 400 euros, and asked us not to involve the police. We reported everything anyway, but when officers searched the property, the abandoned house was empty. The mattress, food cans, and photographs had all disappeared. My neighbor told them his brother did not exist, and that we must have confused him with someone else. They could not do much without evidence, especially because my cousin had left the photographs inside the house when we ran. About a month later, my cousin called me after putting his baby to sleep. Someone had left another black plastic bag inside the minivan, even though it had been locked in his garage all night. There was only one photograph inside. It showed my cousin and me standing in the abandoned house, looking at the wall of pictures. It had been taken from directly behind us. Written across the bottom in black marker were the words, "I told you not to talk to him." At this point, we decided not to talk about this anymore, although whenever we hang out for a beer or something, it is briefly mentioned. I am thinking of going back there. I know he is too. He fixed his lock on the back door of the minivan and texted me today telling me, "We need to talk." Our next story comes from our /ghost stories, posted by Reddit user Tamsjar. The title is, "I wasn't sure if my roommate was real or a ghost." About 7 years ago, I, 28 years old now, was having a hard time finding an apartment in my budget during my internship in a new city. After talking to many realtors, one finally helped me find a shared 2-bedroom apartment with a lady, 30 years old, who happened to be from my hometown, but we had never met before. This apartment was the top floor of a very narrow building in a busy local market and well within my budget. The arrangement I had with the lady was that we would share the kitchen and living spaces, but we had our own bedrooms and bathrooms. She also let me have her old bed that was not exactly in great condition, but worked for me. My bathroom was also accessible from the common lobby between our bedrooms. When I was moving in, my mother was there and helped me out. She also happened to have a conversation with the lady about her job in our hometown. The lady mentioned that she travels an hour away for work all week and goes to visit her family on weekends. She seemed sweet, but there was an awkward interaction I had witnessed between her and the realtor that made me wonder if they were seeing each other. After my mom left, I realized that she had been the only one who saw the entire apartment and had been in the lady's room. The lady never offered for me to hang out with her, and I did not want to be a bother if she did not want to be friends. She frequently used to come to my room. She told me to lock the door of the bathroom that was accessible from the lobby for privacy. I locked it on the day I moved in and never opened it since. Our arrangement for the kitchen was to cook on our own if needed instead of hiring help, as we used to be out for work for the most part. A week passed. She used to leave for work before I did and came home after I did. I used to come home and make dinner. A couple of times, I noticed that there were dirty utensils and flour on the kitchen counter. I assumed it was her doing, as I did not really go into the kitchen in the mornings. I just assumed she was messy. At the end of the week, she asked me if I had been leaving my utensils and the kitchen counter like that. I told her that was weird because I thought it was her. She said it was not, but we ignored it, thinking we must have missed something because of our busy schedules. In the following week, the same thing kept happening. We did not discuss it, as we preferred to just stay in our rooms and did not interact much. I assumed that she must have hired a cook. A couple of weeks in, my friends came for a sleepover that I had discussed with the lady. She did not mind. It was raining when my friends got there. We wanted to get some drinks, and my friends went out in the rain to find something, but could not go too far and got what they found at a nearby wine shop. They brought back a very creepy-looking bottle of whiskey. It was shaped like the head of an old man gasping for air and was called something like Crazy Romeo. We had a laugh about this choice of theirs and decided to try it. After one shot each, all four of us combined decided it was too disgusting and felt spiked, so we stopped drinking it before it did any harm. We put it in the empty closet that I was not using. That closet was adjoining the wall of the lady's bedroom. Later that night, all four of us slept on the same bed. All of us heard weird noises coming from inside the closet wall. We wondered what the lady must be doing at that hour. The noises were getting spookier, and we opened the closet door to listen in. I told them I was getting bad vibes from that creepy whiskey bottle. They agreed, and we flushed the whiskey down the toilet and threw the bottle in the trash. Later that night, the poor old bed broke down under the weight of four fidgety adults. The room was too small for us to sleep on the floors, so two of us went to the living room and my friend and I slept on the floor next to the bathroom door. We told the other two to wake us up if they needed to use the loo, because there was no space to walk otherwise. Note that none of us were drunk at this point. I woke at the crack of dawn and went to the bathroom. Everyone else was still asleep. On the shelf behind me, I saw a bottle of liquid that looked like toilet cleaner. It was a plain white plastic bottle with a thick orange liquid inside it. I picked it up to check because I had never seen it before in my bathroom. Assuming that one of my friends must have brought it, I left it there and went back to sleep. When my friends were leaving, I asked them if they had left that bottle in the bathroom. They laughed at me. Why would they bring their own cleaning supplies to a sleepover? Weird. I went back to the bathroom after seeing them off, and the bottle was gone. But there was a mark left from the liquid. I checked the lobby door. It was still locked. I asked the lady if she had by chance left any cleaning liquid in my bathroom. She said she had not been in that bathroom since I moved in. I told myself I must be mistaken and cleaned that mark and the rest of the bathroom. In the evening when I came home to sleep, I could once again hear noises from the closet. I tried to listen in, and it sounded like whispers. I was scared now, since I had never seen the lady's bedroom, and the sounds were coming from there. I was already a little spooked out with my interactions with her. The next morning when she was getting dressed for work, she closed her bedroom door as usual and was packing her purse in the hallway. It was raining. I asked her if someone had slept over with her as well. She said no. I asked her how she was going to go to work in that weather. She said she would catch a cab from the market. When she left the house, I heard her walk down the stairs and ran to the balcony. I had a realization. It was that I had never seen her actually leave the building or come back in before. I was at the balcony before she could reach the ground floor. I waited for about 40 minutes, but she never left the building. I went downstairs to see if she was stuck due to the rain, but she was not there. I immediately called my mother and asked her if she had noticed anything odd about the lady or her room. I thought I had been living with a ghost. My mom said I was being silly and these stories were bizarre. I let it go, thinking I must have mismatched the timings. A few days later, on a weekend, the lady was going out with someone. Out of nowhere, she decided to introduce me to her boyfriend who was in the house. That was it. For months, he had been living in the house, cooking in the kitchen, cleaning behind our backs, talking to her in the middle of the night. Almost all the weird things were explained. She did not tell me about the guy because she was a very private woman, but it was so odd that another person was living in our shared apartment that I did not know of and was there even when I was all alone. I did not make it awkward, and instead we decided to go out together with another friend of mine. We all went out, walked out of the building, went to the mall, had dinner at a restaurant, and walked back inside the building. She was real, not a ghost. She is now married to the boyfriend, and they have a little girl. We did not stay in touch, but yes, I still think about these incidents and remember them very vividly. And that's all for today's Reddit horror stories. If you enjoyed today's collection, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more creepy stories every week. It really helps support the channel and lets me know you're enjoying these videos. I'd also love to hear your thoughts, so let me know in the comments which story was your favorite or which one disturbed you the most. Thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.